This program is brought to you by Suffolk University. Please visit us on the web at www.suffolk.edu.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I want you graduates to know that there are only 4 members of the United States Senate that have served longer than me, but the very important thing to remember is, as of last December, 56 were still older than me. That's the only part I want you to remember, because I don't like this senior stuff. I'm getting very, very senior. You know, Gary Trudeau, the cartoonist, said of commencement speeches, he said, commencement speeches were invented largely in the belief that outgoing college students should never be released into the world until they have been properly sedated. And so my job here today is to sedate you, but in light of the weather, I'm fearful that if you do, you may freeze to death. So I will try very hard not to completely sedate you. Mr. President, thank you very much. My friend Bob Crow, who was foolish enough to risk his reputation and ask me to be the commencement speaker. I hope you are not kicked off the board after them hearing me speak. And to all the distinguished faculty, I noticed as I walked in, reminded me of my law school days, an awful lot of strollers with young babies in those strollers. You're finally hoping he's going to make some money now, aren't you? That's what you're counting on. I know. I hope none of you are foolish enough to follow in the footsteps of many Suffolk graduates and go into the state and national legislature, because you will continue to have your children in strollers when they're 15 years old. Ladies and gentlemen, to Dean Bob Smith for leading this law school into the threshold of Suffolk University's centennial celebration next year. To my friend Bob Crow, as I've mentioned earlier today, for inviting me. And to you professors for the many hours of study that you have demanded, the difficult questions that you have asked these students, and the clear and concise answers you've expected. You have served them well, whether they know it or not. To the families for putting up with the long hours and esoteric contemplations of the legal mind. I'm sure that after the first couple months of law school when they were freshmen, hearing discussion at the dinner table made you wonder whether or not you had done the right thing in producing a son or daughter who wanted to go to law school. But to all of you, in recognizing that the seeds of change cannot grow anywhere other than in a fertile field, and this great law school has provided just that field. And to all of you of the class of 2005, 258 women, 202 men. Two of the judges I walked in with today, we were discussing that notion. When I graduated from law school 220 years ago in 1968 from Syracuse University, there was 1 woman in my graduating class. My son graduated from the same university in 1992 or 91, I can't remember to be honest with you, and more than half of his class was women. And I was saying to 2 of the judges, both female judges, I'll let you determine who said what, I said, you know, when I was a young senator, and the first time I had a chance to appoint judges, I sought to appoint women judges in my state when, in the good old days, or pretending in your perspective, the bad old days when a Democrat was in the White House, and Jimmy Carter was president, and he had a directive. He wanted us to find women to put on the bench. And something like only 10% of all the lawyers in America were women, and we were told that, you know, there wasn't, and the ABA, Mr. President, wasn't particularly empathetic to women on the bench back then because they hadn't put that many years in the practice. And so I was saying to the 2 judges, all that has changed. And I'll let you figure out which judge said what, but one said, I liked it better when there were more men. But well, at any rate, the world has changed. As Yeats once said, it has changed utterly. A terrible beauty has been born. There's a lot going on in the law, and thank God we're utilizing the entirety of our population now. When I went to law school, I went, to state the obvious, to become a lawyer. But my professors at Syracuse taught me a lot more than the mere mechanics of the law. Despite the upheavals and uncertainty that characterized the 60s, I arrived at Syracuse University with a strong sense of purpose. I saw the law as an instrument of change, and I believed that the world of my law school days needed much changing. But what I learned from my professors made that sense of purpose that I went to law school with a great deal more powerful. They showed me that the personal values that led me to the study of the law in the first place matched the principles that undermine our Constitution and underpin our Constitution. An intolerance for the abuse of power, a respect for personal integrity and individual autonomy, and a sense of responsibility to family and to community. They were the values I took to law school, and to my great surprise, and I hope to yours, they were the values that I realized underpinned everything about our system. They taught me that it is our system of law that has enabled us to apply those principles as a society. But they also taught me that the uniqueness of the social contract arrived at was through building blocks within our constitutional foundation, each one of which was essential. And when one of those blocks was pulled away, all the others began to fall. For an apprentice lawyer, that was an empowering discovery, and it made me confident that I could serve the best in myself and in others through the practice of law. People today, as I've been around for, as has been pointed out painfully, for 32 years in the United States Senate, having gotten elected when I was 29, people today ask me, and the press ask me, why I remain so optimistic, why I believe that the 21st century will be another American century, and why I'm so passionate about the issues that could negatively impact on that outcome. Well, it's because I believe America is very much, if you pardon the expression, a Suffolk nation, made up of people like you, realistic, but no less committed, people with grit and attitude and a sense of community. I've spoken at many law schools, and as we were robing in the back, it impressed me the makeup of the board and the people who were there. I was saying to Bob, walking in literally, it seems as though this community takes ownership of this law school. It's more than just another institution. And it is a sense of community that pervades, I think, this class. As graduates of Suffolk Law, you're not like an awful lot of newly minted lawyers who'll be walking out of law school commencements today. Many of you started on a path in life that did not lead directly to law school. Many of you have had full careers in other endeavors. I'm told the average age of the 121 evening students is 32 years of age. The average age of the 339 day graduates is 27 years of age. The youngest among you is 23, and the oldest is 58. You come from 29 states, 14 countries, and represent 179 colleges and universities. You're a powerful portrait of what makes Sussex law community unique among similar institutions. It takes work and spirit and character and commitment to change the course of one's life. For many of you, you want to learn the law to make sure that power is never concentrated in the hands of a few against people like us. For many of you, the law degree you have earned has not come easily. It's not easy to leave a job like Catherine Hobbs did, to take a 50% pay cut to work on children's welfare issues. It's not easy to work 30 hours a week at one job and 20 hours a week at another and still find time not only to attend class and complete the required coursework, but to do it in a way that consistently keeps you on the dean's list. It's not easy, Catherine, but congratulations. It's not easy. It's not easy to set down your books and answer the call of your country like Eric Hall did. A National Guard unit was mobilized in February in 2003, and Eric did exactly that. He put down his books and put on his uniform, shipped out and led 93-person ordnance unit on an equipment and recovery mission in Iraq. It's not an easy task. Nor could it have been easy to come back home from the horrors of 13 months at war, pick up your law books, study hard again, get your degree. Eric, congratulations. It's not easy to overcome personal hardship and physical handicap like John Kilpatrick has suffered. You're all familiar with John's story. His determination in the face of adversity reminds me of something William Faulkner said. He said, "Man performs and engenders so much more than he can or should have to bear. That's how he finds that he can bear anything." To you, John, we wish you the greatest success in the John Kilpatrick Spinal Cord Foundation. Your family, your friends, your classmates are proud of what you've accomplished. Congratulations and good luck, and spread it. Reading about your class, I could go on and on with many of the more than 300 of you graduating here today. But the point I'm trying to make is, you know why you came, and most of you know what you want to do as you leave. The truth is that each of you have come a long way to earn this degree, and each of you is emblematic of the journey of this country and the confidence and optimism I see, and why I believe the 21st century is going to be another American century. It's not because of much else than average folks who decide to do more than average things. Yet it seems in so many ways, in all that we see and read, that we've become an increasingly divided nation. Red against blue, state against state, faith against faith, north against south, urban against rural, left against right, and rarely does it appear that the center can hold. Our national politics are polarized. Our passions have driven us to the very edges of reason on critical issues that demand logic, cool heads, clear, rational thought, and the dirty word today, the ability to compromise. The stakes are much too high for anything less, and they are certainly too high for failure. We know a nation divided cannot stand, and we find ourselves wondering who on either side of the debate is telling the truth. We struggle to understand the facts. In the ideological cacophony we hear from politicians and pundits, and we wonder, who am I to believe? The hard, cold facts seem clear on their face, and they leave us concerned and confused about the direction in which this nation is headed. We read that oil prices reached a record high of $58 a barrel last month, and yet we wonder if we will ever be able to agree on a comprehensive energy policy that frees us from the iron grip of the oligarchies in the Middle East. Every day, we learn major American corporations are sending more and more jobs overseas, and we wonder if the effects of globalization we embrace so readily will benefit us in any measurable way. I was at an interesting dinner the other night. Former secretaries of state, 6 of them, got together to host a small private dinner for the new Secretary of State and invited 4 members of Congress who have responsibility for that area. And I was sitting next to Henry Kissinger at the dinner, and he said to me, and I quote, "Joe, the balance of power has shifted to the Pacific Basin. Will we be able to compete?" According to Secretary Rubin, quote, "We are facing a newly competitive China and India. Serious shortcomings in our public education, basic research, infrastructure, and other requisites for meeting that competition, and much else, are much in need." We are told that the 10-year federal deficit is projected to be $4.5 to $5 trillion if the tax cut we passed in 2001 and 2003 is made permanent, and we wonder whether our optimism is warranted or whether it's misguided. We wonder why the nuclear option you're reading about in the newspaper today that limits the rights of individuals to speak, why changing a single arcane rule in the United States Senate makes any difference at all. We wonder. But I know that as lawyers, you're among the few who understand and hopefully can explain that if you take away one of those building blocks of our constitutional foundation, a single one that's hard to explain and justify in the abstract, if you take away one of them, they all begin to fall. But in the face of all these questions, I confess to remaining an optimist. It comes from the reality. The grit of people like you and what you're made of. It comes from a deep and abiding belief that you will be the ones who seek and find the truth, and you will be the ones who will resolve to make these hard decisions, because we cannot postpone them much longer. I'm also optimistic about our country's future because of the vehicle that has allowed us to achieve our individual and collective successes in our past, our Constitution. Now, I should be up front with the disclaimer. I suffer from having taught constitutional law for 13 years now on Saturday mornings. You're probably thinking how lucky you are not to have had me for 27 weeks instead of just one speech. But I, like many on this stage, and you, have studied the Constitution. And the beauty of our Constitution is not in any one provision in isolation. No matter how eloquently written or well thought out any one provision is, whether it is the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment or the free speech in the First Amendment, the real beauty of our system and its ability to protect us against the abuse of power becomes truly apparent only when you look at the whole system. Our Constitution was very consciously designed to prevent the accumulation and concentration of power in any one person or any one party. And we very consciously decided that we were not going to be a parliament. We very consciously decided that we would have a Senate that has at its function to slow the mechanisms of governance down, to slow down the emotions of the time, and not be a product of a political party's discipline, whether left or right. Our founders deliberately and consciously made that decision. And the system in which they were certainly most familiar, the Parliament, was rejected. And they sought the fragmentation of power to guarantee the unlikelihood of the abuse of power. The protections of due process and free speech are essential, but they do not do anything without a truly independent judiciary to uphold those protections. And here, our founders were truly revolutionary. As your fellow Massachusetts citizen of the time, John Adams, said, and I quote, "The dignity and stability of government in all its branches, the morals of the people, and every blessing of society depends so much upon an upright and skillful administration of justice that the judicial power ought be distinct from both the legislature and the executive and independent from both, that so it may be a check upon both. Judges should not be dependent upon any man or body of men." Ladies and gentlemen, to ensure that judicial independence, the founders gave the United States Senate the power to advise and consent on the president's choice. I might note, for those of you who are students of the Constitutional Convention, never once did giving the power to the president alone get more than a couple votes. As a matter of fact, until the Connecticut Compromise, the president wasn't even counted in on the deal. It was an all-Senate operation. The founders did not see fit to give the president this unilateral power, and they did not give the House of Representatives the check. They gave it to the Senate, a body designed to cool the passions of any temporary majority. And that body, designed very explicitly to play a moderating and reflective role in our system of government, the body did not run by pure majoritarianism. For those of you here today saying the majority should rule in the Senate, I would respectfully point out that there are 45 Democrats and 55 Republicans. The 45 Democrats represent 161 million people. The 55 Republicans represent 131 of the million of the American people. Now, the reason I say that is to point out that this wasn't about majority rule. They wanted to ensure that the judiciary would be beholden to no one man or institution, so they gave the power to the body that worked on consensus and compromise. The body that for the first century of existence could be ground to halt a judge by any single senator. I would point out to you all in this debate you hear about, the fact is that up until 1947, it required a 100% vote in the Senate to pass a single judge. There was no ability to eliminate debate at all under any circumstances until 1947. I would suggest that the success all of you have achieved in your lives, and I know that everything I've been able to achieve in mine has been aided by a constitutional system and framework that our founders and predecessors bestowed upon us, because it makes it difficult to concentrate power. We truly stand on the shoulder of giants. Our charge and your charge as you begin your legal careers is whether we leave a legal system and a constitutional system stronger or weaker to succeeding generations. Someday in the distant future, when your legal careers have ended, will you honestly feel that you left the law and the Constitution that has given all of us so much stronger or weaker? Let that question be the guide for your legal career for those of you who will practice law, and I realize not all of you will. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe America is neither red nor blue. I believe America has a purple heart. The American people are not jaded and they are not cynical. They are not anything but hopeful, but they are confused by us today, and they're confused by what those of us in Washington are doing today. They're wondering why their leadership seems not to call upon them to do anything that might truly unite this country, but rather seems to play not to their better angels, but to their worst instincts. They wonder why there's such a struggle over judicial nominees. But they know, as you know, as I know, that they do not want to be shaken from their optimism. They want to be assured that the playing field will always be level and that our system of laws will not allow power to be concentrated in the hands of any one person, any one party, or any one group. They believe in America's past and are hopeful that we will preserve the best of that past for the future. I'm always quoting Irish poets, and my colleagues kid me. They think it's because I'm Irish. That's not the reason. I quote Irish poets because they're the best poets. That's the reason. And you might think that, let me put it this way. For all the uncertainty we're going through now, as my grandfather Finnegan used to say, I think the folks get it. I think the folks get it. And they know we have to do more than decide that we're only going to have a small portion of the population make the sacrifices for our security, and only a small portion of the population make the sacrifices for our centrality. I think that we should adopt as our anthem, Your Generation, a stanza from a poem called The Cure of Troy by Seamus Heaney. And he wrote in that long poem one stanza that says, history teaches us not to hope on this side of the grave, but then once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice rises up, and hope and history rhyme. I believe with every fiber in my being that you're about to graduate into a world and a country that's on the precipice of being able, if we are smart, if we are patient, and if we are generous, to change the world on the margins, to actually make hope and history rhyme. Those of you who graduate from this law school today, you can be no more certain of the outlines of your future than those of us who graduated 30 to 40 years ago. But our law degree endowed us with a conviction that if we pursued the noble aspirations of our profession and upheld the building blocks of our constitutional framework, we could build lives of meaning and in the process improve the world. I believed that then, and I firmly believe that now. I believe that if in fact you do what has brought you here with the same conviction that got you here, that we have a shot of making hope and history rhyme. So may God guide us in remembering we have an obligation to keep the door open for those who come behind us and defend against those who would try to abuse power in any way. Congratulations and good luck.
This preceding program was brought to you by Suffolk University. Please visit us on the web at www.suffolk.edu.